Hi everyone, Chris from BattleGoat Studios. I'm going to do another video on modding, and I'm going to talk again about the map editor. Now, if you missed the previous video, that doesn't necessarily matter because the entire first video was very much about setting up the required files to just launch the map editor and get into it. I'll briefly show the files involved here, but some of you may already know how to create those. So this video is really just going to quickly get into the map editor and start actually editing the map. If you don't know how to set up some of the files that I point to, just look for the previous video about map editor, getting into the map editor, or map editor introduction. Not sure what we're going to name that video. Watch that one first if you have troubles getting into the map editor watching this video. So I have my screen shared, and this is my Steam installed copy of the game. In the previous video, we used the .scenario folder to make a new scenario called World 2027. It has its own subfolder with a maps folder, and in that maps folder are the two files that the map editor edits. And you can see the last time they were changed for me was actually, yeah, so right now those are showing 2:11 p.m. My clock is actually showing 2:46. So those were created half an hour ago. And I'm pointing that out just because I often check my date stamp after I've been in the map editor just to be sure these are the exact files I've edited and the ones I want. Because sometimes I'm copying things around because they have to go up to our storage and whatnot. So those are the files you need. The MAPX, the OOF, and they have to be referenced by a scenario, and you must be working in the scenario folder. If you have all those set up, I can go back up to the root directory and I can run the map editor. So in the map editor, I'm going to select World 2027 as the one that I want to edit. And I will say load. It should take just a second to load. I'm going to play with these buttons to reset my right side. That's a small glitch in the map editor. And then my intention is to do some editing of Japan. Maybe we're going to add some facilities, remove some facilities, some transportation, lots of different stuff. I haven't really decided what I'm going to work on. I'm going to make some changes, save them, rebuild the cache to show you that the changes got into the game. And I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show you some of the tools that function in the map editor. I suppose the first two things I should talk about is saving and quitting. The save button here will save to the exact folder that I've set. And loading the game will bring back up that pop-up. And here there's quitting. When you quit the map editor, the game does make some auto backups that are buried. So if you make a mistake somewhere, and I speak from experience, every now and then I quit and I realized I forgot to push the save button. If you did that, actually let's make a very simple change. I'm going to go to the second tab here, resources, and I'll explain everything I'm doing after. Selected resources, unlock, light forest. I'm going to turn on terrain and do some stuff. Now maybe I forget to hit save and I quit. Let's see if I remember how to find our backups. Scenario, World 2027. So those weren't saved there. But there should be in maps, backups. I can tell there should be, there they are. So if I quit, and you can see they're called auto backup queue for the MAPX, the OOF. If I failed to keep those, what I would have to do is take both these files, cut them out, find my map, scenario, World 2027, maps, paste them here. And then I would take these names, delete these files, rename these to match it, and it'll recover the change that I lost. But I'm not going to go through all that. Just wanted to show that there are backups. And I may mention other backups for other functions later. Let's go back into the map editor. World 2027, load. And I'm going to try and make this video fairly short, just demonstrate small pieces, lots of small little things, and then we can do other videos later to focus on more concentrated changes. So there's two sections in the lower left I want to focus on. The first one is called Place Containers and Components. When we talk about containers and components, we're talking about the things that make up a hex on the map. And you can see here, kind of like the land department in the game, we have this visualization of the 7 parts of a hex. In the game, there's a centerpiece and 6 edges that can be used. So here I can see I've got 3 farms. That matches up to these 3 farm objects here. And I'll show removing things first. Here we see there's also a list of all the things. It sort of matches when you hold over on the map. So I can take this agriculture facility, click this button. I've just removed something from the map. And I could do it again and do it again. This is also a case to demonstrate a function that we've chosen to set up in the game, is that when a city has nothing around it, it is shown at a slightly larger size. Let's say I want to put those farms back, or maybe I want to put something different. I want consumer goods facilities. Well, I can go through this list, which is very long and does not have a whole lot of filtering. Goods, consumer. I will talk about some of the numbers in a moment. Now, I want to add one of those here. Clicking on the map will not place them at this time because I have locked it. And generally placing facilities, you don't want to be map clicking to do those anyway, because you want to control where they go. In the map editor, there are not many checks and balances. You could place 2 things in the same place by accident. So I'm going to put 1 facility there, and then on the opposite side, I'll put 1 there. But like I said, if I wasn't careful and I click again, oh, actually it didn't that time. I know there are some times. Be cautious of that. The map editor functions at a very raw level to be powerful, but that does put responsibility on the designer to check that they've done it properly. So we've added 2 facilities to the map. Let's talk about this list here, because as I said, there isn't much you can do to filtering it, but there is a bit of stuff you can do. There's check mark buttons underneath the list, and they are tool-tipped. The first one says it will show only regionally owned upgrades. So when I turn that on, it is looking inside the border of this region, and it tells us there are 10 military goods facilities right now in this region. If there was 0 of something, it's not in the list. The effect of that is if I go to a small country or a poorly developed country, let's take, I believe that's Sudan, Somalia. My apologies to anybody living in Somalia if they feel that I don't mean to speak ill of their country, but development is a challenge in a country like that. As you can tell, it has a total of 6 facilities in that entire region. You may also recognize that this is broken up. I believe this is 2 parts of Somalia. In the map editor, we can break up countries more than what's seen in game. Some of the files that assemble the map to make it run can group things together. An example of this that I'll show, I believe Australia. Yeah, Australia is broken into individual pieces, but in most of the maps, you're playing all of Australia. Same thing with the United States. Although anybody who's played the Shattered World map will recognize that this is some of how Shattered World is created. Though every now and then we thought of things that we never even used. Interestingly, I believe Texas is divided into 3 pieces, but we never use that division. We only ever use Texas as a whole state or the United States as a whole country. Let me jump back to Japan. So we removed some facilities, we added some facilities. Right, I was talking about filtering. The advantage of filtering it is it'll make it easier for me to find certain things when I want to add more. The next check mark also allows me to exclude city facilities. I feel like that jumped my list. That may not be functioning as I was expecting it to work anymore. I'll have to test that once I'm offline. The next one shows just your transportation upgrades. Excuse me, I'm coming off a cold. I thought I'd be better than this for the video. Obviously, if you're doing a lot of roads and rails, being able to quickly filter and find these, we wanted this, so it became a filter. The last one here allows us to toggle a component overlay, meaning I want to see everything of what I've selected. Now, this check mark won't actually work until you have a selection in the list. So, oh, and another way you can do actually is when you double click something in this list, it becomes selected in this list. Now I can turn on the overlay, and when I zoom out, it starts showing me those pink circles everywhere for where are all these facilities. There's a number of buttons down here. I'll let you guys sort of explore those. For any location here, I can change the name. So this is Matsubase. I can also change the base population that will be placed. Later, when the region is defined and the whole country is given a total population, if what was placed on the map is less than the population total in the other data file, the difference will be randomly scattered, favoring population centers. So usually we try and put about 70% of the population into precise cities, and we let the game scatter the remaining 30%. Sorry, this is going to be a challenging video for me with my throat. Next, the map. Actually, I should talk about these buttons after I've talked about a later piece. In this panel about facilities, containers, placing all that stuff, I've shown you the main functions. Adding stuff, removing stuff. I should specify, actually, if I go back to transportation upgrades, roads and rails, they aren't placed in the same way. They do require clicking on the map, and they require you to set a start point and an end point. So for example, if I select road, and I want to make a road connecting these two locations, I will have to unlock the map. Now I can click to set my start location, and you can sort of see it previews where the road is going to go, and when I click again, it builds the rail. There are buttons here to remove, and you'll encounter every now and then the fact that we do roads and rails in layers. There's up to 2 layers. So removing layer 1 might remove some, but then layer 2 removes something else. And then putting it back, I'd click this way and click this way. So roads and rails require the map to be unlocked. Whenever you change, every now and then there are certain functions where the map will lock itself again to try and protect the user from accidentally clicking. Because when this is unlocked, touching the map is going to do something. And especially if you have a pop-up open, for example, you're changing some of the map settings, if you accidentally click twice when it wanted a single click, you're going to hit the map and you're going to do something. So it's always a good idea to lock up the map if you're in between your changes. Okay, this panel, what do we call this one? Resources and info set. This is a big part of making maps in the game because it sets terrain, resources, ownership, loyalty, theaters, battle zones, a lot of big things, and it does allow painting on the map. Let's see how much of this I can cover. I don't want this video to get too big, so I'll probably just cover stuff in this panel. We'll save, quit, and look at our changes, and then I'll save more teaching for another tutorial. Terrain. These will match up to the different terrain types that you can see in game. And the simplest way to demonstrate this is I could say swamp. I have it unlocked. And when I click on the map, why did I not get swamp? Oh, right. Even I can get lost on this. As well as the lock to touch or not touch the map, there are these buttons to determine what can be changed on the map. Here I'm touching terrain, so I'm going to have to turn on the terrain function and unlock the map. Now I can place terrain. And a lot of this, while this may seem excessive, this is from our experience of making errors clicking stuff that we've put in all these protections. So I can paint swamp. I could select something new such as jungle. I could say rough desert and paint over some stuff, or maybe we'll get some jungles with hills and mountains. So this allows you to paint terrain. Now this uses the 3D terrain, and a function I should definitely show is that you can switch from the visualization to the true definition of the map in the map editor by pushing F5. Now I'm going to push the key, but it does take a moment to process. There, now it's switched. This is using 2D rendering, 2D textures, to very precisely show us exactly what terrain type is where. And as I zoom out, you can see that it's not necessarily the prettiest, but it is very precise. And the reason this sort of thing is needed is a hex in the game can be only one terrain type. Now that isn't always the easiest thing to work with in the real world. If I push F5 to put it back, and then I'm going to use the functions of the map editor to hide our 3D terrain. You'll notice that everything I just painted there is no longer visible because it's not part of this satellite imagery. And when working with the satellite imagery, it's easy in a case where, let's see if I can find examples. So obviously this is water, this is land, no problem. But every now and then we have edge cases. This one, for example. Should we make that water or should we make that land? We must make the absolute decision. Let's see what we decided when we map edited. We made that one land. So we sort of have to always decide some of these things. And that does make certain parts of the world very difficult to map for, but that's simply the reality of the tool that we have. So the F5 switches back and forth between the satellite and 3D view versus the what we call terrain layer. And the button here in the bottom right allows you to see just the satellite imagery, which stays at all zoom levels. Or you can see that nicer 3D terrain that we've created, which does not exist at the higher levels. So when painting, if you make your own map, you have to think about what are you doing about the high level. So working with terrain also requires texture changes for the satellite imagery. That'll be a whole nother tutorial to get you guys into. But I'm going to keep this here because this will be a change we'll be able to see in the game. Next thing I'm going to look at is the resources. So maybe on this fictional island I made, I want to put some coal deposits. Using the resources needs these controls here where you're either increasing or decreasing the size of the deposit. So I want to, well actually you can choose not to, which I believe will, oh right, so let me back that up and do them in steps. I select coal. I'm turning off terrain. I don't want to change my terrain anymore. I now want to change my resources. Because I've got coal selected, it highlights for me on the map where we have coal deposits already. With this effect levels on, each click will increase the intensity. If I reverse it to negative, each click will decrease the intensity. And with it set to increase but effect off, means it'll only ever put the first level. So this is going to be a good way of deciding, okay, this is where I want the deposit to be, and then you can come back on a second pass and decide how intense do I want it to be in what locations. So that's resources. I'm going to turn the resources off again for a moment and talk about some of this stuff, because this can definitely be more complex. And if you're just modifying, I don't know how much players will get into it, but I figure I'm going to explain it all. The map is divided into sets of regions. This generates for any country in the world a 4-digit number. But those 4 digits internally are two-digit numbers. When we began map editing a map for Supreme Ruler 20-some years ago, we began in Egypt, the cradle of life. This is block 1, region 1. So that means its ID in the game is 0101. Now, if you view it in a list, that leading 0 tends to be dropped. So most people think of it as being region 101. But it's important if you're going to map edit to understand that it is part of block 01, region 01. Let me give a better example to understand the numbering system. If I go to Canada, all the way over to British Columbia, It is in block 24, and this part of it is region number 8. That means its ID in the game will be 2408, because it's always pairs of digits. And 2408 is British Columbia. The numbering system, I'll show a bit more of that over in Egypt. So this is 0101. I believe this is 0102. Then it's 6. That's 0103, 0104. So you start to get an understanding of how these numberings were used. And in fact, block 1 is North Africa. Block 2 is, I gotta think my east-west, is West Africa. No, that's 3. Block 2 is East Africa. 3 is West Africa. 4 is South Africa. Then block 5 jumps into the Middle East. Specifically Israel, Palestine, Syria, I believe. Actually, sorry. No, even Israel, Jordan, Palestine, I guess, gets block 5. Block 6, Iran, Iraq, United Arab Emirates, all the Middle Eastern countries. But yeah, so this is the numbering system that exists. You can set the block, the owner, and the loyalty. A limitation being that you can make something owned by one person and loyal to somebody else, but only if they're in the same block. That is a limitation of the engine that we had put in place, and it's just how that works. So this is setting the owner. Now let me show exactly what that changes if I change some of these. So I've gone all the way back to Japan. Japan is block 20, region 1. So 2001 is their ID. If I changed this to 1, 1, that location would actually end up belonging to Egypt. And I'm going to leave it there so we see this when I save this out. But if I want to expand Japan's border, I don't want to have to punch in the numbers every time. We do allow a system for painting with these properties. It's what we call InfoSet. Once I've turned this on, the mouse right click will work like an eyedropper. So I've right clicked on the map, picks up 2001. If I left click somewhere else, I've created a location that belongs to 2001, and it's again loyal to 01. I could have made it loyal to 2, and it's going to be a different loyalty. I'm going to right click over here as 1, right click over here as 2. When I left click, so this would not be loyal to Japan, but would be owned by Japan. And so I'm going to leave some of this. Again, I'm doing this very rough, enough so we can just jump into the game and see the changes are affected. Theaters, battle zones. These can also be set here. I think I'm going to leave a lot of that till another time. But I will point to be cautious when using these locks and unlocks, is I can choose to have InfoSet and terrain and theaters and battle zones. Every left click is going to affect all of the things I just turned on. So that's why you'll want to be using these to specifically change what you want to control. The last thing I want to show today before I save this out and show you what it looks like once you launch the game is that obviously what I just did there was one hex at a time. So I turn on InfoSet and I can drag, but painting the world one hex at a time is going to get very painful. Long ago, the only other option was this button for single hex versus hex group, which I'll show you what that does. Oops. Well, that may actually no longer work. Yeah, it would seem that button, we should probably pull it out. It has been replaced. There's now a brush size. 2020 users did not have this. SRU users did not have this. Single hex will do exactly what it says. Small brush will give you the hex and surrounding hexes. Medium brush will go 2 hexes out, and not surprisingly, large brush 3 hexes out. Okay, we've just messed up our map nicely, enough that we should be able to see the impacts of this when we launch up the game. Let me save my map. Now again, personal paranoia because I've made mistakes over the years. Before I quit, I'm going to Alt-Tab. I'm going to go into Scenario, World 2027, Maps. Okay, my timestamp changed. I feel confident I can quit now. Now to see the changes, we're just going to go to the top of the stack where the game's installed, run the game. Sandbox. I need to find the scenarios, World 2027. Now I can't just launch because I've made some changes to the fundamental files that go into the map. I need to go to Game Options, Systems, and I need to force a recache. It'll rebuild my cache for me. For any SRU players, you might remember sometimes it took up to an hour to build caches. Those days are long gone. Cache building has been optimized. The most I've seen a cache take is maybe 3 minutes. Never seen more than that. Scenarios, World 2027. So we've rebuilt the cache. I've selected it again. I'm going to hit start. And if we go to the bottom of Japan, we can see the mess I made. There's this extra terrain, all those extra pockets. If I right-click on this location, it belongs to Egypt because that's 0101 for its region for that exact location. And if we check over here, the farms are gone. The consumer goods plants have been added. Success. So I'm going to stop there for this first dive into actually editing pieces in the map editor. Definitely, if you've got specific things you'd want to know about how to use some of the map editor, leave some comments down below. You can always chat with other modders on the Discord, on our Discord server, or on our forums. There's lots of people talking about ideas. And if you make something, we encourage you to load it up to the Steam Workshop and share it with other people. And as usual, if you're enjoying our games, please take a moment to leave us a review. It really helps with discoverability for the game. Hope you've enjoyed this. I will try and get my throat better and make more of these videos to help the community continue making mods. Take care.